The title of the passage is Return of the Elm, Reintroducing the Beloved Tree to Britain. Elm is a type of tree. Reintroduce means to bring something back. The passage is about growing elm trees again in Britain. There are three question types: matching information, matching features, and gap fill. We'll do matching information questions last because it is easier to do these when we are a little familiar with the passage. We start with matching feature questions. In these questions, we are given a list of items, usually names, and we have to match them to the statements in the question. To solve these questions, I recommend you locate where and how often the names are there in the passage. Then go through the statements, then start with the names which have the least content in the passage. We focus on parts of the passage which are in quotes, and sometimes when it is not in quotes, but it still tells us that it is something that the person has said. We have three names. They're listed at the top of the screen. The third name, Peterbone, is there only in one paragraph. The first name, Matt Elliott, is in two paragraphs, the first and the last paragraph. And Karen Russell is mentioned in three paragraphs. Let's go through the statements. Dutch elm disease is just a name of a disease. Question 19 uses the word rapidly, which means quickly. Visible means clearly seen. So it says if a tree gets this disease, the signs of the disease show very quickly. Question 20 mentions mature elms, which is the old trees. The question is saying that maybe it is better to wait and see that these old trees which have survived continue to flourish or continue to stay healthy. Question 21 is also about mature or old elm trees, and it is just saying that there must be a reason why they didn't die, why they survived, why they didn't get the disease. Question 22 mentions the insects that carry the disease, and it says that the insects are nearby, they are not far away. Question 23 says that you understand how serious the disease is when you see some evidence or some proof of how common this tree was in the past. We now look at what each of these people said and compare it to the statements. We'll start with C, Peterbone, because he is only mentioned in one paragraph. First thing we should do is check which things this person has said. So we focus on those parts. The parts he said are in bold. Here are the meanings of each sentence from section E. You can come back to the screen if you find any part difficult to understand. Let's understand what Bones said. To see unfold means see something happen over time. Stayed with me means I still remember it. Bone is saying, I saw the disease spreading on trees when I was a boy. Trees were a part of rural England, and I still remember how the trees got the disease and the leaves fell. Let's compare it to the statements. Question 19 says, disease spreads quickly. Spread of disease is mentioned, but nothing about quickly. Question 23 is about evidence of how prominent or common the tree was. Peterbone has said that the tree seemed to be a part of rural England. So some things are clearly mentioned. The effect of the disease is kind of mentioned in losing of leaves. Evidence of how prominent the trees is not very clearly mentioned. It doesn't seem to be the answer, but I'm unsure. When I'm unsure, I put a question mark after the answer and keep checking. So that is what I do here. I put C with a question mark after 23. I'll keep it in mind that I have to keep checking. Maybe I'll find a better answer to this one. This is also said by Bone. Beetles are insects which cause the disease. Right on our doorstep means very close. Bone says the beetles can easily come in if we are not careful. The danger of the disease is very close. This is exactly the same as question 22. Insects are beetles. The threat is the disease. Right on our doorstep is not very far away. The answer to question 22 is C. Peterbone. Next, we see what all A. Matt Elliott has said. He is mentioned in two sections, A and G. Again, first we see what he has said and focus on those parts. In section A, these are the parts in quotes, but section G can be confusing. First, we have what Russell has said. So, from here to here is what Russell has said, not Matt Elliott. What Elliott says starts from here. This part is very important, especially when one paragraph mentions two people, to understand which person has said what. First, we focus on what Elliott has said in section A. Here are the meanings of each sentence from section A. You can come back to this screen if you find any part difficult to understand. Difficult to picture means difficult to imagine. This says it is difficult to imagine the impact or the effect of the disease. Then it says when you look at old photographs, you realize the impact. This is exactly what question 23 says. To understand something is to picture it, impact is effect, evidence are the old photographs, prominent is significant. When reading about C. Peterbone, I was unsure about this question, so I had put C with a question mark in the answer. Now we are sure that the answer to question 23 is A. Matt Elliott is also mentioned in section G. Here are the meanings of each sentence from section G. You can come back to this screen if you find any part difficult to understand. The phrase horticultural analog has this small star called asterisk. The meaning is given at the bottom of the passage. You won't get questions based on this information, so we don't need to understand it in detail. It is enough to know that it is about some cultivated plants similar to other existing plants. We'll go through what Matt Elliott said in section G in two parts. First, let's focus on this part. On the face of it means superficially, that is, not deeply. So, if we don't look deeply, reintroducing elms seems like a good idea. But the problem is that the original elms were native, that is, they were originally from that place. The new ones are cultivated copies or clones of the original trees. None of the questions say this. We continue reading section G. Then the problem is explained. Risk of new diseases. Then Eliot says, provide space to those elms that survived. The elms that survived are the mature elms. Mature elms are mentioned in questions 20 and 21. Question 21 mentions a reason or explanation for why the tree survived. This is not mentioned here in the passage. Matt Elliott says over time you might get resistance. That is, in future, the trees might develop an ability to fight disease. That is what question 20 says. Flourish means to grow and stay healthy, which means to recover, to have resistance. So, the answer to question 20 is A. Matt Elliott. Now, let's go through what Karen Russell says. We just have two questions left now. Karen Russell is mentioned many times in three sections. Note that not everything she says is in quotation marks. Sometimes we have Russell says, acknowledges Russell, and for her. We start with section C. Here are the meanings of each sentence from the first paragraph of section C, and these are the meanings from the second paragraph. You can come back to these screens if you find any part difficult to understand. Russell says two things in section C. First, she says that there are many small elms among hedgerows or bushes, but beetles attack when they reach a particular size. Beetles are insects. They are mentioned in question 22. We have already found that the answer is C. But here's a comparison of what Bone says about this and what Russell says. Bone says exactly what there is in the question, which is that the beetles are not far away. That is not what Russell says. That's why the answer to question 22 is C and not B. The second thing Russell says in section C is we need to study trees that survived and find out the reason. It cannot be just luck that they did not die. We now have only two questions left. The trees that survived are mature trees or old elms. They are mentioned in question 21. The question doesn't ask what is the explanation why the tree survived or what is the reason. It just says there must be a reason. That is exactly what Russell is saying. She is saying we need to study and find out why they survived, and that it cannot be just luck that some trees did not die. So the answer to question 21 is B, Karen Russell. We now have only one question left. We have read what Karen Russell says in section C. She is also mentioned in sections F and G. Here are the meanings of each sentence from section F. You can come back to this screen if you find any part difficult to understand. Susceptible means easily harmed. Here, Russell says that the effects of the disease are quick. In 4 to 6 weeks, some trees are fine, there are no symptoms, but trees which are susceptible, which get the disease easily, may have died. Question 19 says if a tree gets infected, the damage shows rapidly or quickly. The confusion could be that the name of the disease, the Dutch elm disease, is not mentioned in this paragraph anywhere. The first sentence mentions the disease, and then it is all about different strains of the disease and its effects. The name of the disease is mentioned at the beginning of the previous section, and the same continues. But what helps is that no other disease is mentioned anywhere in the passage. So, because all parts of the question 19 are mentioned in what Karen Russell says, the answer to question 19 is B. We have all the answers, but Karen Russell is mentioned in section G as well. Here are the meanings of each sentence from section G. You can use these if you find any part difficult to understand or if there is any confusion. This doesn't match any question at all. Here are all the answers with their locations in the passage. It is important to identify the parts where these people have said something. Usually, these parts are in quotes, but not always. This becomes especially important when two people are mentioned in one paragraph. We saw this in section G in this passage. Now we start with gap fill questions. For gap fill questions, the answers are in the same order as the information in the text. To solve these questions, we identify location keywords, find the tentative location of the answer in the passage, then understand the question thoroughly and find the answer. You'll find the exact words for the answer in the passage. The instruction about how many words and numbers are allowed is important. In these questions, only one word is allowed. The location keywords are highlighted on screen. Capitalized words and numbers. Bronze Age, 18th century, and Katisak. All three are only mentioned in section D. So we have the location of the gap fill answers. Here are the meanings of each sentence from section D. You can come back to this screen if you find any part difficult to understand. Let's start with question 24. For hundreds of years, the only tree that was more popular in Britain than elm was blank. We are looking for the name of a tree which was more popular than elm tree in Britain in the past for many, many years. In the passage, an important phrase is ran a close second, which means something was second but very close to the first. Centuries is hundreds of years. So this means elm was second in popularity and oak was first. So oak was more popular. But there are many words in this part of the passage that can be confusing. In the same sentence, it says that elm was sometimes more prominent, which is more noticeable or common. But then the only tree which was sometimes more popular was oak. Also, many tree names are mentioned. Birch, ash, and hazel are all names of trees. Woodlands means forests. So, this means elm was common in forests and it was an important tree in forests that had these trees. This is not about these trees being more or less popular than elm. The answer is from the first sentence. The second sentence is there to confuse you. The answer to question 24 is oak. Before question 25, there is a sentence with no blanks. Such sentences can be important because they sometimes help understand the meaning of the question, but they certainly help which part of the passage to skip. So, first, Bronze Age tools and weapons are mentioned, and then 18th century is mentioned. In the passage, we see Bronze Age tools and shields and swords, which are weapons, mentioned in one sentence, and the next sentence has 18th century. So, we know the answer will most probably be from this sentence. The question is that in the 18th century, elm trees were grown for two things. One is boxes, the second we have to find. In the passage, it says storage crates and flooring. Crates are boxes. Even if you don't know the meaning of crates, you see two things. If you know for sure that flooring doesn't mean boxes, crates should mean boxes. Try to understand the meaning from context. So the answer to question 25 is flooring. Question 26 says elm wood was strong. Then it says two things were made from elm. One is mining equipment, and the second is something of katisak. Apostrophe S means of. We see katisak and mining equipment mentioned in the last sentence of section D. It tells us that katisak was a ship. In the passage, strength of elm is not mentioned, but it is mentioned that it was used for things that experienced high levels of impact, which means they needed strong material. The two things mentioned in the question are reversed in the passage. First, something of Cutty stock is mentioned, and second, mining equipment is mentioned. Two important things here: the extra information, the 19th century sailing ship. Without this, it is keel of Cutty Sark. Keel is part of a ship. The answer to question 26 is keel. Here are all the answers of gap fill questions with their locations in the passage. These were relatively easy. Locating them was very easy because Bronze Age and Cutty Sark are capitalized and mentioned only once in the passage. Now we start with the matching information questions. We are given some statements in the question. These statements have some information, and we have to find out which paragraph or section in the passage has this information. When the question mentions section, we need to keep in mind that a section can have more than one paragraph. For example, in this passage, section C has two paragraphs. I usually recommend that you do this question type last after doing the other question types once you are a little familiar with the passage. Sometimes there is this instruction: you may use any letter more than once. It is given in the questions that we are doing. This means we have 5 questions and 7 sections, and still we can find more than one answer from one section. For matching information questions, we first read and understand all the questions. The key parts of each question are highlighted on the screen and their meanings are in brackets. There can be different strategies for these questions. It depends on the questions and the passage. We start with sections from which we have not found any answer till now. Here we have done matching features questions and gap fill questions. You can see that there have been no answers from section B. So we expect at least one answer from there. We use information we have come across while solving the other questions. If the first 3 strategies don't work, we read the beginning and end of each paragraph or scan the passage with keywords. Let's start with question 14. We are looking for research problems, and the reason for these problems is the small number of large elms which have survived. This gives us some hints. Because research problems are mentioned, that means that most probably a researcher, a person will be mentioned. So we are looking for the name of a person. We have done matching features questions. We have read about all these people. While doing these questions, we have also seen where surviving elms are mentioned. So that is where we look first, in sections C and G. In these, we focus on parts where mature elms are mentioned or trees that have survived are mentioned. Section G says that we should provide space to elms that have survived. There is nothing about how many there are and nothing about research problems. In section C, we have study those trees that have survived, but opportunities of research are limited. That means there is a problem. And the reason is the number of survivors or surviving elms is relatively small. You could get confused because in the beginning of this section, small elms are mentioned. Then it is mentioned that they get attacked by insects. But after yet, surviving large or mature elms are mentioned. So, both the points from the question are mentioned in section C. The answer to question 14 is C. Here are the meanings of each sentence from the second paragraph of section C. You can go through it if you find any part difficult to understand. Moving on to question 15. Details of a difference of opinion about the value of reintroducing elms to Britain. Difference of opinion means different views of something. So we are looking for more than one view on whether reintroducing elms is a good thing. And we may find some words like however or but before the second opinion. Because we are looking for different opinions, we may find it where two or more people are mentioned. We went through all the names while doing matching features questions. Two names are only mentioned in section G. So we'll look here first. Here are the meanings of each sentence from section G. You can come back to this screen if you find any part difficult to understand. Here, first Russell says that there are environmental benefits of reintroducing elms. The contrast phrase is others are more wary. We were expecting something like however, but that is not what we have found. Wary means unsure. So Russell thinks there are benefits, but there are some other people who are not sure that there are benefits. Then Eliot explains the other opinion, the problem of reintroducing elms. It is like cloning, we could introduce new diseases, etc. So, both the points that we are looking for are in section G. The answer to question 15 is G. Question 16. Reference to how Dutch elm disease was brought into Britain. Here we are looking for the name of a place, another country from where it came, or the time when it came, maybe in which year, etc. We haven't found any answer from section B till now. Here are the meanings of each sentence from section B. You can come back to this screen if you find any part difficult to understand. It mentions Canada. It mentions 1920s and 70s, so some years are mentioned, but it doesn't mention the name of the disease, the Dutch elm disease. This is a confusion we had for question 19 as well. The question mentions the name of the disease. We found the answer in section F. It only says the disease at the beginning. Here also, section B starts with the disease. The name of the disease is mentioned in the previous section, but it is the only disease mentioned in the whole passage. Epidemic means disease which spreads a lot. The second epidemic came from Canada in the 70s. Another confusion could be that two epidemics are mentioned. But the question doesn't say how the disease was brought for the first time. There are no details of the first time, but there are details of the second time. The answer to question 16 is B. Question 17. A description of the conditions that have enabled a location in Britain to escape Dutch elm disease. We are looking for three things. Name of a place in England. This place doesn't have Dutch elm disease. And the conditions there because of which the disease is not there. So the conditions could be something like the weather, for example, how hot or cold it is. Two places in Britain are mentioned in section C and section E. First, we look at section C. Here are the meanings of each sentence of the first paragraph from section C. You can come back to this screen if you find any part difficult to understand. First, southern English countryside is mentioned, but here elms are targeted by the beetles. Beetles carry the disease. The question is about a place without the disease. Then Cambridgeshire is mentioned. Epidemic is a disease which has spread a lot. Escaped epidemic means escaped the disease. So, 2 points from the question are in section C, a place in Britain and escaping the disease. But mysteriously means we don't know the reason or the conditions because of which they escaped the disease. The third point about the conditions is missing. So C cannot be the answer. Let's go through section E. Here are the meanings of each sentence from section E. You can come back to this screen if you find any part difficult to understand. This section starts with that there was Dutch elm disease. So that could cause confusion. But from here, today, it says that there are about 17,000 elm trees in Brighton. So these trees escaped the disease. Local factors contributed to their survival means that these conditions are the reason for the survival. So the name of the place is Brighton. The mention of difficult for the beetle to attack, etc., are the details of how they escaped the disease. Strong winds are the conditions. So all 3 points from the question are mentioned in section E. The confusion can be that before this part in the section, the disease is mentioned, and after this also, it mentions that there is threat of the disease. But this part clearly talks about all the 3 points in the question. The answer to question 17 is E. Moving on to question 18. Reference to the stage at which young elms become vulnerable to Dutch elm disease. Vulnerable means having more chances of being attacked or hurt. We need to know when young elm trees have more chances of being attacked by the disease or more chances of getting the disease. The stage can be how old the tree is or how big the tree is, etc. On scanning the passage, we can see these numbers. Trunk of the elm reaches 10 to 15 centimeters. This could refer to a stage, so we focus on what it says. So the stage here is the size of the trunk. Small elms are the young elms. Vulnerable to the disease is targeted by the beetle, or the perfect size for beetles to lay eggs. This is something we have seen many times in the passage, but the name of the disease is not mentioned in section C. This is something we have seen many times in this passage. Sometimes only the disease is mentioned, but here only beetles are mentioned. It is explained before that beetles are insects which carry this disease. This is mentioned in section B. So, beetles attacking means getting the disease. All 3 points from the question are mentioned in section C. The answer to question 18 is C. Here are all the answers of matching information questions and their locations in the passage. The instruction, you may use any letter more than once, is given in the questions, and we can see that 2 answers are from section C. There were no answers of any other question types from B, so we were expecting at least one answer from B, and we have it. One thing very common in this passage is that the question has the name of the disease, the Dutch elm disease. Because this is capitalized, we would expect to find this wherever we find the answer. But that is not always so. Sometimes it's only mentioned as the disease, sometimes it is referred to as the epidemic. For most of these questions, we found the answers comparatively easier because we had done the other question types before. With this, we are done with all the questions of Book 20, Test 1, Passage 2. I'll continue with solutions of this book in future videos. Hope this helped you. Bye for now. All the very best.